Someone is Hiding on Alcatraz Island by Eve Bunting, Chapter 12. The lantern and radio were where Priest had left them when he'd fallen forward. I threw the radio down the hill away from him, picked up the lantern, and switched it off. I carried it and the piece of lead piping with me as I climbed across the jumble of bricks into the shower room. Then I turned the corner into Broadway. I stood close to the cell door levers and tried to think what would happen next. First, Cowboy and Maxie would see Priest wasn't where he should be. They'd think he was inside, hassling me and Biddy, or that he'd gotten bored and wandered off. I hadn't time to think past that because I suddenly heard the two of them. Cowboy's voice was tight with rage. He turned with his back to the cell block. "Priest! Where are you?" "Priest!" Maxie's voice yodeled down the echoing aisle, repeating and repeating into the distance. "Hey," he said, "it's like a cave." "He's gone," Cowboy spat, "and he's taken the light with him. What's wrong with you guys? Can't you do anything you're told? First Bean, then him. When he gets back, so help me." "Hey, I did what you told me. I went with you, didn't I?" I stood well back, able to hear them but not see them unless I stepped forward. And I tightened my grip on the pipe. "I'm going down now to get that lying kid," Cowboy said. "Open the door when I tell you, and close it fast as soon as I'm inside. I don't want the girl running, and I plan on being in there with Danny Boy a long while." The last words drifted back to me along with the clump of Cowboy's boots on the hard stone floor. "What's this?" The clumping stopped, and his voice echoed back. "That idiot Priest's been playing with the paper airplanes again. The place is littered with them." Close to me, very close, Maxie giggled. He was at the levers, shuffling around, his feet tapping, all of him humming like a generator under full power. Cowboy's footsteps stopped. I imagined him peering into the blackness of the cell, steaming to get at me. I heard Biddy beg, "Please don't hurt him, Cowboy. He's just a kid. He was only trying to save us." Good old Biddy, knowing I was out, smart enough to play along. "You, Ranger," Cowboy said. "Maxie's at one end of the cell block and Priest is at the other, so don't even try to run when these doors open." His voice bellowed down Broadway. "Now!" And the echoes, "Now, now, now!" recoiled from the towering walls and ceilings. I stepped forward on the balls of my feet and saw the shadow that was Maxie pull down the big metal lever. The doors clanged open. "Close them!" Cowboy yelled, and I knew he was in the dark of my empty cell, reaching out to find me. While the clatter of the door smashing shut was still ringing in the air, I made my move. I had one chance to get it right, and only one. Maxie wasn't Priest. He wouldn't tumble and roll. If I missed the first time, he'd be on me, and Biddy and I would both be finished. I stretched the way a tennis pro stretches to serve a smashing cannonball serve. I brought the pipe down the way the pro brings down the racket. My breath came out in a tennis pro grunt. If I'd hit Maxie's head, I'd have pulped his skull. But some reflex in my brain and my hand changed my aim from head to shoulder. Maxie sank with a sag of the knees. His shadowy hand dragged at the lever, and I was terrified that his weight would pull on it and open the doors again. But then his hand slid down to join the rest of him on the floor. "The kid's not here! Open the doors!" Cowboy's voice screamed up the aisle. There was a string of shouted curses, and he'd rattled the bars. Biddy called my name. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I bent over Maxie, away from the stretch of his long arms, and turned the lantern full on him. One hand came up against the light, and his legs fluttered. I swear, Maxie would be squirming on the table if he were having open heart surgery. I turned the light on the number of cell closest to him. Then I ran back to the lever and opened the door to that cell. Cowboy and Biddy were still yelling, and I called to her. "It's okay. Everything's under control." At the same time, I took Maxie's legs and began to drag him toward the cell. It's good to be small when you're trying to crawl through a mouse hole. It's not so great when you're pulling a weight like Maxie. He's skinny, but there's a lot of weight in those long bones. I thought of letting Biddy out to help me, but there was something in me that wanted to finish this alone. Maxie jerked and flapped like a beached fish as I tugged him through the cell door. His long hair trailed behind him, brushing its own path through the dirt of ages on the floor. It was the last part of him to clear the door space. I ran back and closed the cell. Then I leaned against the door of the old shower room, my knees shaking and my heart sounding like a locomotive. Biddy and Cowboy were quiet now. Around me, the ghost prison held its breath, listening. From outside came a chirping that wasn't crickets. I recognized Priest's weak little voice. Help, somebody, help! I had them all four of them. Jellybean and Priest outside, Cowboy and Maxie trapped in the cages. I'd done it. Me, little Danny Sullivan, non-brave, non-everything. There should have been cheers and bugles playing, but there was only silence. I turned off the light and began to walk along the darkness of Broadway, swinging the unlit lantern in one hand and my piece of lead pipe in the other. My feet fluttered, Priest's little airplanes puffing them across the floor. I felt unreal. I had a sudden vision of me and the cells and the island. I was way up above, looking down, seeing no color except tones of black and gray and lighter gray. From my perch, I could make out the flat detail of the exercise yard and the old parade ground. The derelict houses, the chimneys and lighthouses pointing to the black sky, the flat roofs of the prison, and me walking along the streetness between the cells, the only thing moving on that cold gray rock that rose mysteriously from the cold gray sea. How did it get there? How did I? Biddy reached her arms through the bars. I saw their dark outline, and I set down the lantern and pipe and squeezed her hands. My hands hurt. Did you get Maxie? I nodded, though I wasn't sure she could see. And Priest? I nodded again. Aren't you going to let me out, Danny? She was crying, and I had a hard time answering because I was crying too. I'll let you out right now, I said. First, I need to get your cell number, though. I don't want to let him out instead. We'll go down to Maybelline, and maybe you'll have to go alone for Maybelline, I whispered. I'll stay. Remember the hole in the back wall? I think it's too small for him, but who knows? I'll keep guard. She turned her face against my hand. The salt of her tears stung the raw places. I picked up the lantern and pipe and turned the light into my cell. My cell? When did it get to be mine? Cowboy stood stiff and silent in the middle of the cage. The big hat shrouded his face, and the poncho hung motionless. His feet were planted wide apart. He could have been a figure in the wax museum on the wharf, portrait of a gunslinger, wanted dead or alive. The light shone in his eyes, making them gleam the way the cat's eyes had gleamed. I realized that he hadn't said anything while I talked with Biddy. Somehow, that made him more sinister. I stood way back, and I knew I was still scared of him. Something moved under the shadow of the hat, and I stared, not believing. Cowboy was smiling. It's not over, Danny boy, he said then. We'll all be going back to the city. They'll have nothing to hold on us. We'll be on the streets again. And in school. You'd better run far and fast, Danny boy, and you'd better keep running. This time I'll testify, I said. Biddy spoke quickly. I will too. How about assault with a deadly weapon? Kidnapping? Attempted murder? Trespassing? Cowboy was amused. That too. I wish I could say that I wasn't afraid anymore and that I never would be again. But I was. I held the lantern with both hands to keep it from shaking. Cowboy's smile widened. You've got no guts, you know, Danny boy. Neither have you. I saw suddenly and clearly what I'd never seen before. I knew why I hadn't hit Priest harder, why I hadn't smashed in Maxie's head. Liking to hurt and scare doesn't make you a hero, Cowboy, I said. No way. And what does, kid? I don't know. Maybe being afraid and doing what you have to do anyway? Cowboy was still smiling as I walked down Broadway to pull the lever and set Biddy free. They sent a Coast Guard boat for us when Maybelline phoned. It came out of the darkness that lay between the city and Alcatraz, its big light like a yellow eye searching us out. Jellybean was brought on board on a stretcher. Cowboy and Priest and Maxie followed him. All three were handcuffed. I thought maybe they wouldn't look at me. but they did. It'll be a while before I forget.